So continue measuring from the reference at the rear to the front now. So starting up here, setting 0 at the end. So I take these dial indicator measurements at various positions down towards the headstock end here before bluing up and then scraping. And then I do this, of course, not only for this surface but for the others also in between there. So taking these dial indicator measurements here also at intervals while scraping ensures that you retain alignment. Of course, if you grind the bed, you don't have to worry about all these things, but that's out of the topic here, of course. Okay, done with that. Then it's scraping time, and I have blued up the straight edge. Now we'll use that to measure these surfaces. Now I'm taking time to clean the straight edge and bed thoroughly. I mean, with the bare hands, just wipe off, so I'm sure that there is no grit or material in between. Then I'll invert the straight edge onto the bed that is now pointing the way horizontally. This is to avoid fighting gravity all the time. This is of utmost importance as I learned it. This way you don't have to fight gravity and you can get a good feel and touch how this sits. And this one is clearly worn, as is evident when we take off the straight edge after the bluing and see how the print looks like. So just touching here, a little bit here, and at the far end, nothing much there, but not much coverage really. This is quite normal, I mean that it hits at the ends, and it'll take some cycles to get it right. The scraping itself here will be at least attempted to be done here. Hand scraping technique. Since the surface is not so large, I think that'll prove okay, otherwise you have to tuck it down better. And I see that the scraper is very dull, it just scoots over the surface, so this needs to be improved, so grinding. And the edge shall bite like this, so it's just stopping my nail. And an opposite corner to avoid hitting the edge here. We should have turned the bed to the other direction. That means like so. But since this is a reference stage, I just carry on. A little bit over here. A little more here and over here and here. And this way you just carry on until everything has blued up. And between each cycle you switch side 180 degrees so you get those cross hatch marks. And here we can see how it improves, sort of creeping a little bit in towards the middle. Next cycle, an improvement here, yes, and then the area with no contact, and it's touching over here close to the headstock, and then under the headstock itself. Another cycle, more improvement, less area in the middle where it doesn't touch, and more over here, and also under the headstock. And yet another cycle, the coverage creeps into the center, and you can experience less density, really. I mean, it doesn't really matter as long as it creeps towards the center. And this is really no rocket science. Just continue the cycles with scraping and bluing up until it covers all over. And I've adopted this style of holding the scraper with 2 hands. Gives me much better control. I can push with my body. That's it. Then vacuuming. Then some stoning. You don't have to overdo the stoning, just enough to get rid of those burrs, really. Burrs. Then you have to blue up again. From time to time you may have to top up the blue, but not so often really. You shall be able to see through the layer at any time. And take time to feel how it sits. And you try to hold only the straight edge over where you can feel test contact. So if it's high in the middle, for example, you hold in the middle, and if it's high like here, a little bit towards the outer edges, then you can hold like I do here. I also try to move it in a figure 8 or similar, not just sideways, but it's difficult since this is such a narrow surface. And then we'll see what coverage I got. Yeah, a little bit more towards the center. It's normal that you lose the density, as said, and let's say you have to just carry on until you have coverage from end to end, and then work on the details later. And as mentioned, we now have a situation actually where it's a little bit high in the middle there, so hence I hold only over that area where it's contacting. It's less concern here because it's not the situation as such, but if you had a situation where you had a kind of a banana shaped, like convex surface, high in the middle, and then you applied pressure on the outer edges, then you would kind of roll over it and then get it to print all over. In other words, get false readings and then misinterpretation and never get anywhere. So as evident, there's a lot of work back and forth, many cycles, before you end up with a sufficiently good result. And it has improved and is improving. And as coverage actually, yeah, almost all over now, at least lengthwise. But of course, we want a better surface finish, so we just carry on until we have the correct amount of coverage or density. The next cycle, coverage improves, yet more density is needed. Improving the PPI, the so-called points per inch. This is important because then we also improve how long this will last. And yet another cycle. And here I have stoned harder, hence you can see the marks are bigger. And this is not necessarily good, because oil retention will be less. More marks, better oil retention. But I did that so it's more evident. And you can see the coverage a little bit better. So, and then it's time for a control measurement. So with the dolly and the dial indicator, from the reference surface at the rear to the front newly scraped surface. This has to be done at intervals. So setting 0 up at the tailstock end, and then moving the measurement device slowly down towards the headstock end. And as we shall see, I have made somewhat of a classical error here on this green specimen. I've scraped it so it's a little bit off, some hundreds of a millimeter, and this is because I should have made more control measurements in between the cycles. Not dramatic, but anyhow needs to be corrected. So even though it's flat, as evident by the bluing, it is not in alignment with the reference surface. So just another control measurement to see that I haven't made any measurement errors. And as we shall see, this is true, that it is slimmer up here. So back to scraping and correcting this mistake. At the same time, I can measure these two inner surfaces.